Torah of Yahuah. Shalom, shalom. Shabbat shalom to the 12 tribes of Yashar'AL. Shabbat shalom to the older brother, the stick of Yahudah. Shabbat shalom to the younger brother, the stick of Ephraim. Shabbat shalom to the strangers and the sojourners who sojourn in our midst and who have attached themselves to us, the olive tree, and are no longer considered as the Gentiles or of the nations, but are now considered as native born. It is written that there is one Torah, both for the native born and for the stranger. In other words, that is to say, there is one good news for the native born and for the stranger. And to that I say shalom, Shabbat shalom to the native born and the stranger who is ever here stopping by to watch this video. Peace and blessings, favor from our Father, from our Kadosh Father and the Shamayim, from my house to y'all's. Peace and blessings, much love from my house to y'all's. Welcome back, beloved family. Welcome back for another study, another lesson from the word of our Father. Because every word that is spoken on this channel is, I pray that every word that is spoken on this channel, that it never be the words of this vessel, of this earthen vessel, but that the words of our Heavenly Father are set apart, our Kadosh Father, that they be His words being spoken through this earthen vessel. All right. Welcome back to another teaching, another study, another video to hear the words of our Father. I pray everything has been well, beloved ones. Today is Shabbat. It is the Master set apart Shabbat day of rest. And it is as the scriptures declared, it is a delight to keep the Shabbat, to rest on it. It is the 7th-day Shabbat, which most know as Saturday. Today is his Shabbat day. And so to all who are resting, Shabbat Shalom. Pray your rest is going well. And, I pray you have been well and everything has been going well, and that y'all have remained steadfast and immovable in our Master, and that y'all continuing in the work, knowing that your labor is not in vain, and that as we are resting this day, on this Shabbat day, that the labor that you work will lead to that rest that we all long to enter into. But nevertheless, again, as I said, welcome back to another study, another lesson. You may be asking, or you already might know based on the title of the video, what will we be studying about? What is the name of this? What is the name of the study? I guess to start it off. So the name of this study, if you're taking notes, will be called The Good News and the Everlasting Covenant. The Good News and the Everlasting Covenant. Part 1. What is the Everlasting Covenant? So it's I guess you can say this, the main title of it is The Good News and the Everlasting Covenant. And then after that will be the question of what is the Everlasting Covenant? All right. I guess to touch on the good news, if you're coming from the Christian church, and you ask people, or you ask a common Christian rather, and you have that Christian mentality, and you ask, how do I say it? My bad. If you go to any Christian church, and you ask any common Christian, you ask them, what is the good news? What is the gospel, as they say? More than likely they might quote John 3:16. For Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Or they might quote Ephesians 2, for we are saved by grace through faith and not of works, lest any man boast. or whatever they might say. But pretty much these are the common things you hear from any Christian, you know. Now, if you know anything about me, while I did grow up in the Christian church to an extent, I never had any deep how do I say, deep convictions, rather. How do I say deep? I was not indoctrinated. Yeah, that's the word. I was not too deeply indoctrinated by the doctrines that come forth from the Christian church, because when I was a kid, I just went because my parents made me. And I did learn a thing or two about, you know, what was sin and what was right and what was wrong. But it kind of just stopped there. But I didn't really have a deep indoctrination instilled in me. And I'm glad for that, you know. But I'm saying that to say, you know, everything that I know about their doctrines is stuff that I have heard. Not that I so much believed it at one point. I can't speak from that, I guess, being in that. I can't speak from it from a personal standpoint, but it's just some stuff. There's things that I have heard over the years in my walk, watching Christian pastors, hearing them, what they say, and just trying to get an understanding why they believe what they believe. And, you know, although they preach a lot of truth, alongside that truth that they preach and teach, there's a lot of falsehood. A lot of falsehood. And that is just one of many falsehoods that they understand as far as their understanding of what the true good news is and what the true, as they say, gospel is. You know, what is the true gospel? What is the true good news? You know? And that's what we're going to be going over. And you might be questioning, okay, well, what does the everlasting covenant have to do with the good news? I mean, why is the question even being asked? What is the everlasting covenant? You know, what is the everlasting covenant? We're talking about the good news, what the Christians know as the gospel. What does the everlasting covenant have to do with that? I mean, if you're stopping by this video, do you even know what I am talking about? What I am talking about as far as the everlasting covenant. And if you're stopping by and you're wondering what the true good news is and what is the everlasting covenant, well, this is the video for you. Okay? And I pray by the end of this video and the videos that will follow, because this is part 1, so this is going to be a series of teachings of the good news and the everlasting covenant, part 1, part 2, however long the master desires for it to go until this message is finished. It's going to be a series of teachings, if you will, broken up into different parts of the good news, of what the good news, because the good news is one thing, but there's different, I guess you can say, aspects to look on and understand of the good news. And that's why it's going to be in parts, because there is a few aspects that make up the one true good news, if that makes sense. But nevertheless, one of the first things we need to understand is, what is the everlasting covenant? What is the everlasting covenant? What is the eternal covenant? Everlasting, eternal, same thing. What is the eternal covenant? What is the everlasting covenant? And that's what we're going to be going over. All right? So before we continue, if you are a student of the script, you already know this, you know. But for those that may be coming by, and I know when I first came into the truth, I didn't even know what a covenant was. And so the first thing to understand, we're going to understand 2 key points before starting this actual teaching, because these 2 key points is going to help us in our understanding of what is the everlasting covenant. So the first thing you might be asking, if you don't already know, I know most people already probably know if you are a student of the script, but if you are not, you might be asking, what is a covenant? All right, if you simply do a simple Google search, simple Mariam Webster, I do Mariam Webster most of the time. The definition of what a covenant is a usually formal, solemn, or binding agreement. Compact. Usually formal, solemn, and binding agreement It means a written agreement or promise, usually under seal, between two or more parties, especially for the performance of some action. And so in simplicity, it's an agreement. And more specifically, it's an agreement between two parties, whether it's two groups, two people, two nations, whatever it may be. It's between two parties, an agreement between two parties, especially for the performance of some action. So a covenant is a two-sided agreement. It's an agreement that must be kept on both ends, or how many other ends, because it's either two or more parties. Let me take that back. It's usually two or more parties. So it can be 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, a group. This covenant can be 2 or more people, and pretty much whatever agreement is made, every party rather has to keep their end of the agreement. And that is what a covenant is. That is what it means to keep covenant. To keep covenant is to guard the covenant, is to walk in accordance with the words of the covenant that was made. All right, both parties have to keep their agreements, their promises, and they both have to fulfill. All parties have to fulfill their end of the agreement. That is a covenant. Remember that, because that is the strongest that is one of the most important understandings we need to understand when it comes to this truth, is a covenant. And not just any covenant, but the everlasting covenant, in which we are studying today. All right. Another important fact another key point in fact that we need to understand about a covenant, about a scriptural covenant, is that to either establish or renew a covenant, there must be a death. All right, we're going to read some witnesses, but this very key point of that there has to be a death in order to either establish or renew a covenant. According to scriptures, there must be a death. And we're going to see this point, this key point being played out through the scriptures that we will read, and throughout all of the scriptures. But obviously the scriptures we have today, this is the script. This is one of the most common things that we will continually see throughout the scriptures, is that in order for a covenant to be established or renewed, there must be a death. Okay? But to read a couple of witnesses, I'm just going to read 2 witnesses just to establish this fact, this important fact that there must be a death for a covenant. We're going to go to Hebrews 9, the book of Al-Barim, Hebrews chapter 9, and we're going to read 16 through 17. Hebrews 9, chapter 9, verses 16 through 17. Starting at verse 16, it says, "For where a covenant is, it is necessary for the death of the covenanted one to be established. For a covenant over those dead is firm, since it is never valid while the covenanted one is living." So there it goes. Where a covenant is, it is necessary for the death of the one entering into a covenant to be established. For a covenant over those dead is firm, it is sealed, it is established, since it is never valid while the one entering into covenant, the covenanted one, is living. Okay? There must be a death. A witness to that, Psalms 50, the book of Psalms chapter 50. And we're going to read only verse 5. The book of Psalms, chapter 50. And we're simply going to read only verse 5. Reading verse 5, it says, "Gather my lovingly committed ones together to me, those who have made a covenant with me by slaughtering. Those who have made a covenant with me." Who? Yahuah. Is the master speaking. "Those who have made a covenant with me by slaughtering." In other words, by a death, it's speaking about the slaughtering of an offering, of an animal. All right, obviously when they used to slaughter animals. But the point is, a slaughtering is a death, is it not? Yes, it is. To slaughter an animal is a death. And so this is a second witness here. Those who have made a covenant with me by a slaughtering, by a death. All right? And so, again, we're going to see the same thing, the same principle, the same key point being played out throughout the scriptures, that a covenant can only be established or renewed by and through a death. And these two things, understanding what a covenant is and how it's established, is very important to understand going forward. Because this is what's going to help us to understand the good news and the everlasting covenant. The good news and the everlasting covenant. Okay? So, first precept. Now we're gonna actually go dive into the study. First precept, we're gonna actually go back to Hebrews. We're gonna go back to Hebrews chapter 13. Yeah, Hebrews. I lost my place. Okay, Hebrews 13. 20 through 21. The book of Hebrews chapter 13 verses 20 through 21. Hebrews chapter 13. And we're going to read verses 20 through 21. Starting at verse 20, it says, "In the Elohim of peace, who brought up our master Yahushua from the dead, the great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work to do his desire, working in you what is pleasing to his sight. Through Yahushua Messiah, to whom be esteemed forever and ever. Amen." Or so be it. Okay? So we see here, and the reason why I'm reading from what most know as the New Testament. I'm reading this verse from what the Christians know as the New Testament, when it's not really a New Testament. It's simply just the Brit Kadashah, the renewed covenant. I'm reading it for just that very fact, because, when you coming out of the Christian church or coming from the Christian church, most have the understanding that when the Messiah came, he came to establish a new way. He came to establish a new belief. He came to establish a new covenant. They will, if you ask any Christian, they will tell you that is the old covenant. That is the Old Testament. We're under a new covenant, a new testament now. And it's why in most Bibles, if you get any Bible, common Bible, you will see in the beginning, before Genesis, the book of Bereshit, you will see Old Testament. You skip over to the book of Matthew, right before you go into the New Testament, you see that page that says New Testament. All right. And most with those deceiving pages, you fall into that trap. You fall into that understanding that there is two covenants, that there is two testaments, that there is two beliefs. There was a belief under Israel, and there is a new belief under Christ. And we're no longer under the law, under Christ, but we're under grace, under a new covenant. This is the understanding that most Christians will tell you. To that I say, that is a lie from the pit of hell. I'm sorry to say, I'm sorry to be harsh, but that is the truth. Because here in the book of Hebrews, we see the mention of an everlasting covenant. I don't think I've ever heard any Christian read this verse and expound on it and ask the question, what is this everlasting covenant that the writer of Hebrews is talking about? Because I thought that there is a new covenant, that there is a New Testament. See, if you know anything, and we're going to get to that word everlasting, if you know anything about the word everlasting means that there is no beginning and there is no end. There is no beginning or no end. It is eternal. It is eternal. And so why do we see the mention of an everlasting covenant in the Barit Kadashah? And this is why I'm reading it, because most Christians will simply read over this verse and not ask the question, what is the everlasting covenant? What is this everlasting covenant? And instead of allowing line upon line, precept upon precept, the truth of the word to answer this, they lean on their own understanding. They lean on what they understand what Paul said in their interpretations of Paul or whatever writings. It's not always Paul, but it's typically Paul. But they lean on their own understandings and make up their own understandings, and they fall into that false doctrines of devils, the doctrine of demons, that there is two testaments. And this is a lie from the pit of hell. I'm sorry. But the true understanding is this, is that there is only one eternal covenant, one everlasting covenant that Yahuah has made. All right, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but we need to understand that Yahuah has established one everlasting covenant. One everlasting covenant. Okay, remember that. We're going to line upon line, precept upon precept, allow the word to reveal this truth. There is one everlasting covenant. One everlasting covenant. All right? And this is why I'm reading it here, because again, most Christians will read this and just read over it and not ask the question, what is the everlasting covenant? All right? There is one everlasting covenant that Yahuah has made. So that page that says New Testament, go to your Bibles and rip it out. And go to the front page where it says Old Testament, rip it out, and boom, you got one book. You got one book. You don't have to do that. I'd be just telling people that figuratively to ignore that. Just ignore those pages, because it's only one book. It's one book. It's one truth. It's one way. It's one life. And it's one everlasting covenant. And we're going to allow our Father to reveal the truth of what is the everlasting covenant. The New Testament, I have a note here. The New Testament makes mention of an everlasting covenant, but the question remains, what is the eternal covenant? All right, let's go to Isaiah 24, verses 5 through 6. And this will be a witness to the book of Hebrews. The book of Isaiah 24, verses 5 through 6. The book of Isaiah, chapter 24, verses 5 through 6. Starting at verse 5, it says, "For the earth has been defiled under its inhabitants, because they have transgressed the Torah, that is to say, the instructions, changed the law, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore a curse shall consume the earth, and those who dwell in it be punished. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth shall be burned, and few men be left." I'm going to read that verse 5 again. "For the earth has been defiled under its inhabitants, because they, the earth, the world, the nations, the world, they have transgressed the Torah, the instructions, changed the law, and broken the everlasting covenant." The everlasting covenant. And so this is a witness to Hebrews. And it is revealed to us what the everlasting covenant is. All right? If you are a student of the script, you will know that the everlasting covenant, the set apart, eternal covenant of our Elohim, is the Torah of our Master. Yes, if you understand that the Torah is an eternal agreement. It is an eternal contract. It is an eternal binding agreement between two parties. Between multiple parties. Okay? The Torah is the everlasting covenant. The Torah of Yahuah is the everlasting covenant. The inhabitants of the earth have transgressed the Torah. They have transgressed the laws, changed the law, and broken the everlasting covenant, the everlasting agreement that Yahuwah has made. Okay? The Torah of Yahuwah is the eternal covenant. We have to understand that. We have to understand that. That his laws, his law, statute, and his commandments that the Christians say have been done away with, it is the eternal covenant that Yahuwah has established, as we see, not simply with just his set apart people, and we're gonna touch bases on that. But this covenant that the master made was made with the earth, which was made with his creation. This covenant is known is more accurately the eternal covenant of creation. All right, and we're not gonna go too in depth about the eternal covenant of creation, but because obviously it is the eternal covenant. But just know that this covenant that the master has established was not simply just established with a people, but it was established with his creation. Okay? But nevertheless, the eternal covenant that the master has established is his law, is his Torah that the world has not only broken, but have changed. And that sounds like a lot of religions, more specifically Christianity. They have changed the laws. They have transgressed, changed the laws, and broken the everlasting covenant. And to that I say, verse 6, therefore a curse shall consume the earth, and those who dwell in it be punished. This covenant that was established, the word says, has been broken, it has been changed, and the eternal covenant has been broken. And to all who have broken this covenant, cursed are you. Cursed are you because you have transgressed the eternal Torah, which is the eternal covenant. That word for everlasting, when it says the everlasting covenant, this is what we were going to read to bear witness to Hebrews. The word everlasting, if you simply go behind it in the Strong's Concordance, is H5769. And it means olam. It's the Hebrew word olam. And this word means the vanishing point, generally time out of mind, past or future, eternity. It means always, ancient time, anymore, continuance, eternal, everlasting, of old, lasting, long time, old time, perpetual, at any time, beginning of the world, without end, and without end. All right. So this everlasting covenant that we see that is mentioned in the book of Isaiah, and we're going to see it throughout scriptures. Don't just say I'm just picking two verses and just running with that. We're going to line upon line, precept upon precept establish this truth. This everlasting covenant that is being mentioned in Isaiah is olam. It is eternal. It has no beginning. It is without end. It will always and continually be here. And there goes the word for olam means the vanishing point. What does that mean? This eternal covenant that Christians say, that religion says that is done away with. The word for olam means the vanishing point. What does that mean? That this covenant that was established, which is the eternal Torah, it goes so far out into eternity. It goes all the way out into eternity to where it makes it to the horizon and it vanishes. You know, when you see like a ship, if you see the horizon of the sea and the sky and everything, and you see a ship going out into the horizon, and it pretty much goes out to the point where it vanishes. All right, that is the eternal Torah. It goes so far out into eternity, going beyond the vanishing point to where it's no longer there, to where rather you can no longer see it, but yet it's still and will always and forever and continually be there. Even though you can't see it, it goes so far out into eternity, beyond the vanishing point, beyond the horizon. You can no longer see it, but just best believe it's there. It's there. This covenant is eternal. It has no end. The writer of Hebrews understood what this everlasting covenant is. And what we're reading here in Isaiah and in other precepts that we will read, it is the eternal Torah. All right. That's why he says, let's go back to Hebrews. Let's actually go back to Hebrews real quick, because I want y'all to actually catch what he said. What he said. It's line upon line, precept upon precept. But Hebrews 13, and we're going to go back to what we read. 20. It says, 21. It says that, 20. And the Elohim of peace, who brought up our master Yahushua from the dead, the great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant. Remember the blood, the blood, the blood, the blood of the eternal covenant. It make you perfect in every good work to do his desire, working in you what is pleasing in his sight through Yahushua Messiah. All right. What is the desire of the Father? What is that work that he is working in us that is pleasing in his sight? All right, we're going to allow scripture to reveal to us what that desire is. And in Isaiah, it already pretty much answered it. It is to obey it. Because to disobey it, to change it, to break the covenant means to be under a curse, brings you under a curse. So what do you think the alternative to that is? Is obedience to the covenant. It's obedience to this eternal Torah, in which if you understand, if you obey, will bring forth a blessing, will bring forth favor, will bring forth the loving commitment of our Father. Do you understand? But we're going to allow scripture to reveal that. You don't have to take my words for it, because those are not my words. Those are my Father's. I have a note here. The covenant that the book of Hebrews mentions is the same covenant mentioned here in Isaiah. The Torah of Yahuah is the eternal covenant. If you are a student of the scriptures, you will understand that the same covenant in Torah, that the covenant that we're reading about here in Isaiah, the same covenant and Torah was the same Torah and covenant that was given to Yashar'AL. All right? That's the one thing we need to actually go to. Exodus 19, 1 through 8. So this is what the master was saying to me earlier about, not only was it established with his people, but it was established with his creation. But we're not going to focus too much on the creation, but so much with his people. All right, just to keep it more simple and more, because we can go on, and the teaching could go longer, but nevertheless, if we go to Exodus 19, 1 through 8, verses 1 through 8, we're going to see that this covenant, this everlasting covenant that was made with creation was passed down and established with his people, Yashar'AL. And we're going to establish that through multiple witnesses, that it in fact has been established and will always be established with his people, Yashar'AL, commonly known as Israel. Always and forever will be. The covenant that we read in Hebrews, the eternal covenant that we read about in Hebrews and in Isaiah, is the same covenant that was established, that was renewed with Yashar'AL. All right? Exodus 19, verses 1 through 8. Book of Exodus, verses 1 through 8. Book of Exodus 19, verses 1 through 8. Starting at verse 1, it says, in the 3rd month after the children of Yashar'AL had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they set out from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. So Yashar'AL camped there before the mountain. And Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahuwah called to him from the mountain, saying, This is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov. To the house of Yaakov. And to declare to the children of Yashar'AL, not to the Christians, to Yaakov, to Yashar'AL. All right? Verse 4. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. And now, if you, Yashar'AL, this is the party he's speaking to. Remember, a covenant is a two-side. An agreement established by multiple parties. Here, there are two parties, Yahuah and his people. And so he's speaking to the other party. And now if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession. And this is Yahuwah's side now. He's promising, if you keep your side of the agreement, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples of the earth. For all the earth is mine. And you shall be a reign of priests and a set apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Yashar'AL. Here goes a marriage ketubah, a marriage agreement, a two-sided agreement. Yahuwah promises to make them his treasured possession, which consists of favor, blessings, and inheritance. If you understand the promises of the Torah, there is an inheritance, a barakah, and favor given to those that obey his covenant. This covenant was established with Yashar'AL, his people. And the side that the end of the agreement that Yashar'AL has to keep is their obedience to this eternal Torah, to this eternal covenant, to this good news. Torah of Yahuah. And Moshe came and called for all the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahuwah commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahuwah has spoken, we shall do. So Moshe brought back these words, brought back the words of the people to Yahuwah. So what just took place was vows. This is vows being exchanged between a husband and his bride. If you understand, Yashar'AL is his bride. All right, because a covenant, the covenant that Yahuwah, the eternal covenant, is a marriage agreement. If you can understand, it is not just any covenant, any common agreement, but it is a marriage ketubah. It is a marriage contract. It is a marriage agreement between the master and his bride, Yashar'AL. Yes, Yashar'AL is his bride. All right. And so here we see the exchanging of vows. The master set out the ketubah, read the ketubah, had his servant Moshe read out the ketubah, and now his people Yashar'AL, his bride, is agreeing. They are agreeing by their lips that everything Yahuwah has said we will do. They are entering into covenant. They have exchanged vows. This is where we get the principle. This is where we get the principle of the exchanging of vows. Because the same way Yahuwah married our people by giving them the ketubah and the people agreeing to it, it's the same way a husband and wife must come together in marriage. There has to be the exchanging of vows, because a marriage agreement, and an earthly marriage agreement, is a ketubah. It is a binding agreement. And it must be established through the exchanging of vows, because vows and oath and swearing are all binding. To swear an oath is a binding agreement. All right. And so here they have bound themselves by oath to obey this eternal covenant forever. Forever. And if they obey this covenant, then Yahuwah, his end of the covenant is to make them his treasured possession. And we're going to see what that means later on. We're going to see what that really means to be his treasured possession. What does it mean? What does it consist of? All right, it consists of blessings, favor, and inheritance. Remember that. Blessings, favor, and inheritance. This is what it means to be his treasured possession. All right, because we are his bride. But nevertheless, this covenant that was mentioned in Hebrews, witnessed in Isaiah, is the same covenant that we read here in Exodus, It is an eternal covenant, and we're going to read in multiple. Don't just stop. We're not going to stop here. We're going to line upon line, precept upon precept, establish this understanding that this covenant that is mentioned in Hebrews, in the Barit Hadashah, is the same covenant mentioned in Isaiah, is the same covenant mentioned in Exodus, in Genesis, and throughout the scriptures. There's only one covenant. And this covenant is the covenant that was established with his people, Yashar'AL. All right? In order for us to truly understand the covenant that was established with Yashar'AL, we must go to the beginning where it began on earth. So for us to get a more better and solid understanding, the beginning is always the answer. You know, you don't start a book or any movie in the middle or in the end, but the best place to always start is the beginning. And that's why I always tell people, before even reading the Barit Hadashah, the New Testament, get a foundation in the Torah. Study his Torah. Study the beginning first before you even think about jumping into the New Testament with a lack of understanding and lack of foundation. We have to have a solid foundation of the truth of the Torah before reading the New Testament. I'm not saying it's wrong and that you shouldn't, but I'm recommending that you should, because again, that the renewed covenant, the New Testament, is a second witness, if you will. It's a second witness to what was already established, that was already established from the beginning. All right, the Torah that was given to Yashar'AL is the first witness. The renewed covenant is just a witness upon witness upon witness, line upon line, here, there a little. It bears witness of itself. And if you go into the new covenant, the New Testament, what they call the New Testament, and you go into the renewed covenant and you study it from a lack of foundation, you are bound to be led astray. All right? So I recommend to study from the beginning. Study from the beginning and get a strong foundation in the Torah before you begin to try to read the renewed covenant. All right? And especially before you go to read Paul's writings. All right? Because many Christians twist the writings of Paul and are led astray to their own destruction. They twist the scriptures to their own destruction and their own demise because they lacked understanding and they lacked the foundation in truth. But nevertheless, let us go to the beginning. We're going to go to Genesis, all right, where this covenant began on earth. And that is the key point to understand. This covenant, this does have a beginning on earth, all right? It has a beginning on earth. Because this covenant, if you understand, again, like I said, like the master said through me, is solemn. It's eternal. Eternal means it has been the same yesterday, today, and forever. It has always been the same. Eternal. Eternal means without beginning or end. All right, because this covenant that was established with his people, and what we're about to read here in Genesis was starting in what the the covenant that was established with his people, but which really started on earth with the Dhammas, which we're going to read, started in eternity. It started in eternity with our Father, because the only one in Scripture that is known as everlasting is Yahuah. He is known as the everlasting Elohim. His Torah is known to be everlasting throughout the scriptures. His commands, his righteousness is everlasting. All right? So that just goes to show the covenant, which is the Torah, which is Yahuah, is olam, eternal. It has no beginning or end. This covenant is Yahuah, if you can understand. All right? But we're not gonna focus too much about that, but I just felt led to say that because the covenant we're going to read here in Genesis is the beginning of it on earth. Because it does have a beginning. It has a beginning on earth. But in eternity, all right, in eternity, there is no... There is no time. All right, with Yahuwah, there is no time. If you can understand, time is a create. The very concept of time is a creation. It is a creation in and of itself. That's why when everlasting life is ushered in, there will no longer be time. Because Yahuwah is without time. If you can understand. He has no beginning or no end. He is Olam. And so this covenant, which is Olam, has no beginning or end in eternity because it is Yahuwah. But nevertheless, Genesis 1:26 through 31, we're going to read where it began on earth. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 31. The book of Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 31. And Elohim said, reading 26, my bad. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping creatures that creep on the ground. And Elohim created the man in his image. The image of Elohim he created them. Male and female he created them. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and increase, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over all the creeping creatures on the earth. And Elohim said, see, I have given you every plant that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it is for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is a living being, every green plant is for food. And it came to be so. And Elohim saw that all that he made, and see, it was very good. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the sixth day. So here, obviously, we're reading about the account of the creation account, in which the master is creating the heavens and the earth and all that is in them. And here we see we're on the sixth day when man was made. When he made man and created him, and caused him to have authority over all the creation, over all his creation, over all the beasts of the earth, the beasts of the earth, and the fowls of the air, and the fish of the sea. He gave man authority to rule on earth. All right. And immediately after that, he gave him a Torah. All right. So we see already the beginning of the instructions being given to man. If you understand here what's taking place, not only is he simply creating Adam, but he is creating Adam, and Adam is being born into covenant. Because it goes back to what was mentioned earlier. This covenant wasn't merely just established with just Yahuwah's people, Yashar'AL, but this covenant was established with creation. It was established with creation. And so Adam was made from the creation, was made from the earth, All right. And so everything that was made, Yahuwah established his covenant with his creation. And Adam was no different. Adam was created and born into covenant, created in the image of Elohim. And that just goes to show what a son of Elohim must look like. What one who claims to be in covenant with Yahuwah must walk like. You claim to be in covenant with him, but you don't walk in his image, and you don't walk in the image that he has set. You are a liar, and the truth is not in you. All right? He made man in his image to walk as Elohim on earth, to walk as visible images of the invisible Elohim, because Adam was ruler of the earth. And because he made him ruler of the earth, he also created him to walk in his image. Because he is the son of Elohim. And because he is the son of Elohim, he established a covenant with him. Adam was born and created in covenant. Do you understand? And we're gonna, don't just take my word for it, but we're gonna allow witnesses to establish this truth. Adam was born into covenant. And we can already see the covenant, Yahuah and Adam covenanting with one another. Because immediately after he created Adam, he gave him an instruction. Be fruitful and increase, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. He also created him to rule over his creation. So we see instructions already being given. We see two parties covenanting with one another. Yahuah establishing this covenant with his son. And remember, a covenant is an agreement established with multiple parties, two or more parties, for the performance of an act, for both parties to fulfill their ends of the covenant. All right, and so here we see our Father establishing a covenant with his son. All right, and within that covenant, right rulings are being given, instructions are being given. In other words, the marriage agreement is being established for Adam to obey and to keep his end of the agreement. Can you see it? Can you see it? I pray you can see it. And also one thing to keep in mind too, note, be fruitful and increase. Remember that. Remember that. Be fruitful and increase. Because that's not the only time we're going to see it. All right? Remember that. Be fruitful and increase. But just understand, this is an instruction. Next chapter, Genesis 2, verses 15 through 17. Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Okay. Starting at verse 15, it says, and Yahuah Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. And Yahuah Elohim commanded the man, saying, eat of every tree of the garden, but do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall certainly die. You shall certainly die. So we see an additional instruction being given. We see again two parties covenanting with one another. Remember, to covenant with someone means to keep your end, to keep your for both parties to keep their end of the agreement. And here is another instruction being revealed. Here is another instruction of this contract that Yahuah made with Adam. All right, that now Adam is expected to obey. This is the contract. Just look at it like that. This is part of the contract that must be fulfilled. This is the binding agreement that Adam must now obey, because he is the son of Elohim and he is covenanting with Yahuah. He is covenanting with the master and the master with him. And so we see the act that must be performed, that must be fulfilled, that must be guarded in order to guard this covenant. A covenant must be guarded through obedience, And here the master is given another instruction that is part of this eternal covenant and expecting his son to obey. Guard, this is a covenant that I'm establishing with you, Adam. And this is how I will covenant with you, Adam. This is how I will covenant with you, and you will covenant with me. If you guard your end of the agreement, I will guard my end of the agreement. And you will be my son, and I will be your father. And my favor will rest upon you, provided if you obey. Provided if you obey your end of the contract. Because Yahuah will and always keep his agreements. He is not a man that he shall lie, nor a son of man that he shall change his mind. And so there is without a shadow of a doubt that he will ever break his end. So it's just a matter of us, his people, his son, to guard our end of the agreement. And here he is establishing with Adam a covenant and giving him the words of the covenant to obey, so that Adam can covenant with Yahuah and Yahuah with Adam. They can have fellowship with one another. Okay? This is an eternal covenant that was just established. The words of the ketubah have been laid out. And now it's all up to Adam, his son, to guard the ketubah, to guard the contract. Does it make sense? Can you see it? I pray you see it. I pray you see it. All right. Adam was and is the firstborn son of Yahuwah, and the everlasting covenant was established with Adam. So not only was man created in the image, and to walk in covenant means to walk in his image, but understand, Adam was Yahuwah's firstborn son too. Adam was the first fruit of the soil. Adam is and always will be the firstborn son of Yahuwah. Remember that. If you are a student of the Torah, there is very great significance in being a firstborn son, because if you know the Torah of inheritance, the inheritance always goes to the firstborn son, and that plays along with this good news, with this eternal Torah, all right, with this eternal covenant. The inheritance is always associated with the firstborn. All right. Adam, who is his covenant son, is also his firstborn. So that already says a lot. But we're gonna get there. Okay? But nevertheless, we know the story. We if you're a student of the script, you know we know what's gonna take place in the next chapter. All right. The contract has been established. All right. And all that was left was for Adam to keep his end of the agreement, to keep his side of the contract. But we're going to see what happened. We're going to see what happened. Genesis 3, verses 1 through 7. The book of Genesis, chapter 3. And we're going to read verses 1 through 7. And we're starting at verse 1. It says, "And the Nahash was more crafty than all the lives of the field, which Yahuwah Elohim made. And he said to the woman, Is it true that Elohim has said, Do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the Nahash, We are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, Do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the Nahash said to the woman, You shall certainly not die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave it to her husband with her, and he ate. Then both of the eyes of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. And they heard the voice of Elohim walking about in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahuwah, Elohim among the trees of the garden." So it just goes to show Elohim was walking in their midst. What do you think walking in their midst alludes to? He had a fellowship with them. His presence dwelt in their midst, and that just goes to further establish that they had a covenant. You don't fellowship with someone that you don't have a covenant with. You don't break bread. You don't fellowship. You don't dwell with someone that you don't have a covenant with. And so here we see Yahuwah covenanting with his son, tabernacling in his midst, because they had a covenant with one another. There was a contract, but we just see that there was now a breach of contract. There was a breach of the contract. See, the wages of sin is death, beloved ones. As it says in Romans, I believe, chapter 6. Well, the wages of sin is death. What is sin? Sin is the transgression of Torah. And so every time, let me go back. Sin is the transgression of Torah. The eternal Torah, which is the eternal covenant, which we're reading about here in Genesis, that was established with Adam. The eternal covenant is a contract. It's an agreement between Yahuwah and his people. And here Yahuwah established the contract with Adam. And he told them, in the day you eat of it, you will die. The wages of sin is death. In other words, The breach of the contract is death. All right, if you know anything about just earthly contracts, every contract, at least supposed to, every contract that you sign, it's supposed to lay out all the expectations of this agreement. It lays out all the expectations of the agreement. All right. And when you sign it, or when you agree to it, or you swear an oath to abide by it, or whatever, you have entered into a binding contractual agreement to then fulfill this covenant. But when you break, even again, as I'm saying, when you break even an earthly contract, what typically happens? Most of the times, there's penalties, is there not? There's typically fees, penalization, early termination fees, late fees, whatever. There's usually a penalty. Some people can even go to jail or get sued for breaking a contract. There's always a penalty for breaking a contract, for breaking a covenant. And when it comes to Yahuah and his eternal covenant, the breach of contract is sin. Sin is the transgression of Torah. In other words, sin is the breaking of the ketubah, it's the breaking of the contract. You have broken the eternal Torah. You have broken the contract. And so because you have broken the contract, there must be a penalty. And with Yahuah and his covenant, the penalty is death. For you to breach and to break the contract, this is death. This means death. This means death. The wages of sin is death. And we just seen that both man and woman, because Yahuah first created man and then made woman, and the covenant was established with them both. They both broke the contract. They both broke the contract. So what does that mean? That means death is now they must pay the penalty of death. Can you see it? Does it make sense? In this now, you have broken my contract, Adam. You have broken my contract. And because you have broken my contract, my son, because you have broken the contract, my son, you must now pay the penalty of death. You must now pay the fees. You must now pay your debts. You must now pay it. Because this is right ruling. This is order. This is the agreement that was made. If you fail to pay, if you fail to keep your agreement, a contract, my son, you must pay the price, because I have spoken. And the day you eat of it, you will die. Okay? So Adam broke the contract. And obviously we know who it came from. It came from the serpent. It came from Hashatan. Which just goes to show, if Hashatan does not care about agreements. Hashatan can care less about a contractual agreement. It is written in the renewed covenant. I can't remember where, but somewhere in the renewed covenant, I believe in the book of Romans, that pretty much a reprobate mind, one of the characteristics of one who is of a reprobate mind is a covenant breaker. One who breaks covenants. One who does not guard their covenants. I believe it's in Romans 2. I could be mistaken. Romans 1 or 2, around there. It is written. But a key characteristic of one who is of a reprobate mind is one who breaks their covenants. One who refuses to keep their covenants. And so we see here a Hashatan walking in that very, how do I say, that very fruit that was just mentioned. That wherever you see the breaking of contracts, the breaking of agreements, the breaking of covenants, this is not of the master, but this is of the wicked one. This is of the adversary. This is of the hissing serpent, Hashatan, who will always lead you to break your covenants. When or if you establish a covenant, Hashatan is going to try to make you to break your covenants, because we just seen here, he just caused Adam and Kuah to break their contract with Yahuah. And now because they took heed to his counsel and broke the contract, now a penalty must be paid, and that is death. All right, but here is favor. Here is grace. Here is favor that the master is about to extend. Oh, you Christians, you think grace, you think favor is a new concept? You think compassion, you think loving commitment is a new concept, is a New Testament concept? We're going to see. We're going to see. So we're going to remain in the same chapter, but we're going to simply go to verse 21, and we're going to read it, and we're going to allow the master to expound on it. So they just broke the contract, and obviously if you continue to read, the master speaks judgment over man and woman. Then now the judgments that they must now keep throughout their generations, both man and woman, that we must still keep. But nevertheless, he speaks judgment over them. And now we make it to verse 21. And Yahuwah Elohim made coats of skin for the man and his wife and dressed them. All right. So this is probably another verse that a lot of people who are probably not students of the, I don't know. I don't want to say that. But a lot of people might overlook this and not ask the question, where did these coats of skin come from? And if you have understanding, you know that these coats of skin came from the slaughter of an animal. And not only that, we see who made the coats of skin. It was Yahuwah. So what do you think just took place that day? What do you think took place after their transgression? Favor, compassion, reconciliation, repentance, them being restored to covenant. All right. The contract had been broken. The eternal covenant had just been broken now. So what do you think must take place? Not only does a price have to be paid, but in order to remain as a son of Elohim, in which Adam was and is, in order for him to remain, he must be in covenant. So what do you think had to take place? A renewal. A renewal. So verse 21, we see the covenant, the eternal covenant, being renewed with both Adam and Kuah through the slaughtering of an animal. All right. Here we see the first atonement taking place on earth, the first animal sacrifice being taking place on earth, the first slaughtering being taking place on earth. Okay? And this is when the covenant is now being renewed. The covenant is being renewed through the shedding of blood. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Without a death, there is no covenant. All right? A covenant cannot be established or renewed without a death. All right? They broke the contract. And so there was need for a renewal, and there was a need for the penalty to be paid. And so here in this slaughtering of the animal, both the covenant was renewed and the penalty was paid. Because this is Torah, the judgment must be carried out. It must be carried out. He said, in the day you eat of it, you will die. There must be a death. There must be a death. There must be a death. All right? There must be a death. And so we see the death of an animal taking place. Why? Because this was chesed. This was favor. How was it favor? Because Yahuwah had every right to consume Adam. He had every right to consume Kuah because they broke the contract. He had every legal right to penalize them, to bring forth the penalties of the Torah, which is death, to execute right ruling. It would have been a righteous thing for Yahuwah to strike down Adam and Kua. But because of his love, his loving commitment, because of his everlasting love for his son, he extended grace, he extended favor, he extended compassion to Adam. And instead of consuming his son, he poured out his wrath upon an innocent being, upon an innocent animal. And not only that, he used the skins to cover their nakedness, to cover their shame, to cover their sin. Because sin and nakedness are synonymous. They sinned, they knew immediately they were naked. It goes to show, every time we sin, we are naked. We are walking in shamefulness. And so now their shame had to be covered. Their sin had to be covered. Atonement means to cover, cover, cover. And so he used this animal's death. He poured out his wrath upon this animal and put this animal to death. And the blood of this animal renewed the covenant with his son Adam and his daughter Kua. And not only that, he used this coat to cover their crimes. All right? That's not to say, now don't misquote me, I'm not saying that the blood of these animals was sufficient. And this is where it leads to the next part, what needs to be explained. So again, as was said, Yahuwah had every right to consume Adam and Kua for their crimes, for their breaching of the contract. But he extended compassion and poured out his wrath upon this animal. But we have to understand that the blood of bulls and goats was never able to take away sins. It was never able to truly pay the price. Their blood was not sufficient enough. Their blood was not good enough. It was not. It was not. All right? Their blood was not sufficient enough to pay the price, because if it was, then a Savior would have never had to come. The blood of our Mashiach would have never had to have been shed. And that's where we talked in Hebrews, the blood of the everlasting covenant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. A Savior would have never had to come if their blood was sufficient enough. All right? But their blood, and so we must understand that their blood was not sufficient. It was not good enough. And so this is why throughout the generations, from firstborn son to firstborn son, as the covenant is being passed down and renewed from generation to generation, from firstborn son to firstborn son, is what we're going to read. We're going to read witnesses to establish this. This is why the slaughtering of animals took place. You think our forefathers were just doing it as simply just an act of worship? No. They were doing it for their sins to be covered, for them to be guarded, for them to be kept in Yahuwah's favor, for them to keep covenant with Yahuwah. Do you understand? They did this throughout their generations in order to continually walk in covenant with the Father. Because Adam sinned. Through Adam, sin came into the world. Death came into the world. The penalty of death that needs to be paid came into the world through the sin of Adam and Kua. But so that he will not consume them, he then commanded them. Sometime after this, after the first animal being slaughtered, he gives the instruction to Adam, continue this practice throughout your generations. Continue to offer the blood of animals, because I have every right to consume you. You broke my contract. You broke my contract. And so I have every right to penalize you and to put you to death. But because I have loved you with an everlasting love, my son, offer the blood of these animals throughout your generations, and my wrath will be poured out upon these animals until salvation comes. And thus we see in the writings of Paul, as he says in the book of Galatians, we were being guarded under Torah, guarded under the law. It was our schoolmaster, and we were being guarded under the law. Why were we being guarded? Because the penalty of death could not be sufficiently paid. Could not be sufficiently paid through the blood of animals. Their blood simply served as a temporary substitute. And their blood had to be continually shed because, again, their blood was not sufficient enough. But their blood simply served as animal after animal, slaughtering after slaughtering, bloodshed after bloodshed. Their blood was being used to cover our crimes until salvation would come in the person of Yahushua HaMashiach. And we're going to get to that. All right, we're going to get to the good news of our Master Yahushua. But I'm just wanting to expound on that. That favor is not a new concept. Grace is not a new concept. All right? I'm not saying the blood of these animals brought forth salvation. I'm not saying that their blood was sufficient. But the concept of favor, the concept of compassion, of grace is not a New Testament concept, beloved ones. Grace has always been extended to his lovingly committed ones. Grace simply means compassion. Compassion means loving commitment. Loving commitment is extended to his lovingly committed ones who commit themselves to the Torah. And if you know anything about our righteous father Adam and Kua, they devoted themselves to the Torah. They repented of their crimes, and compassion was extended to them. Had they not repented and refused to repent like Hashatan, compassion will not have been extended to them. But because they had a true broken and contrite heart, the Master extended compassion. The Master extended favor onto them. And the covenant was renewed with them. And they continued to walk as son, and Adam continued to walk as a son of Elohim the rest of his days, looking forward to a greater expectation. Looking forward as he slaughtered the blood of these animals, he looked forward to a greater expectation, a greater deliverance that was to come, and that was promised to him. That was promised to him and to his sons and to his generations, and to his descendants rather. He looked forward to a greater deliverance, a greater expectation. Okay? And so this is why the blood of animals was shed throughout the generations, beloved ones, because their blood was not sufficient. But this right ruling had to be carried out. It had to be carried out. The wages of sin is death. They broke the contract. They broke the eternal Torah. And so their blood served as a temporary guard, as a temporary substitute for our blood. Because the blood of these animals symbolized our blood. Where we deserve to die, these innocent beings died for us. And this should have pricked our hearts and caused us to obey. All right? That's what the Master wanted. He never wanted the blood of bulls and goats. He always wanted our obedience. For us to lovingly devote ourselves to him and to obey him. But we failed him. We failed him. And although we deserve to die, he extended compassion. We love because he loved us first. Not because of anything we did. And so compassion, grace, favor is not a new thing, beloved ones. It's not a new thing. And here we see the covenant being renewed with Adam and Kua. And this covenant is going to be renewed. It's going to continue to be renewed throughout the generations of creation of the sons of men. And we're going to see from generation to generation how this covenant will continue to be renewed throughout the generations, through the shedding of blood, through the obedience of the covenant with firstborn sons throughout the generations. But I think I'm going to stop it here. We are finished with, as far as in the beginning part, as far as in Genesis. We had to read it from the beginning because everything started in the beginning. But the next part is just going to be a continuance. So it's going to be the good news and the everlasting covenant part 2. What is the everlasting covenant? Continuance, if you will. So just look forward to that. We're going to continue down this series of studies to understand the good news and the everlasting covenant, which, if you understand by now, are one. There is not separate. I know I separated the two, but just understand that the good news and the everlasting covenant is the same thing. They are one. The good news is the eternal covenant. The good news is the Torah. The good news is the favor given to us in the person of Yahushua HaMashiach, which again is Torah. But nevertheless, I pray you understand that by now. And as the Master continues to open up our understandings, whether you know this or not, whether you know it, Barak Yahuah, if it's just a refresher, Barak Yahuah, if there's new understanding, hallelujah. I pray that what he has shown thus far has, either edified, built up, encouraged, whatever it does, as long as it brings you closer to my Father, that is all I want. May he be esteemed in all that we do. Look forward to the next teaching, beloved ones. Until the next time, much love. Shalom, shalom.